Hi, I'm Jules and I'm one of the co-founders here at the Body Retreat. I'm doing this little video blog or vlog, whatever you want to say, to kind of track my journey to heal myself from my diagnosis of Hashimoto's. So I received my diagnosis probably 4 weeks ago now, and this diagnosis came probably after about a 3 or 4 year journey of my visiting my doctor and seeing independent specialists and consultants for what seemed at the time a series of unrelated minor illnesses or symptoms. And so I thought, if you've seen my previous video, that I'm going to share my journey. I've decided not to go down the traditional medical route, but rather I'm going to look to support and heal my body from the inside out, looking to work in what my nutritional therapist Kate calls a multifactorial way. And so I'm going to be looking at predominantly diet and supplementation, but then also looking at other things to support my system as well. So I thought that this would be interesting to allow people to share the journey with me, because I know that there are so many of you out there who have got some form of autoimmune condition. Perhaps it hasn't been fully diagnosed yet, but perhaps some of the symptoms that I've experienced or some of the concerns that I had might resonate with you. And it is a journey and we're all individual, and I don't think there's one size fits all when it comes to any woman's health or any particular condition. And it's for us each to find our own way. But I'm going to share kind of what I'm going to be doing, share as I go through this journey, and hopefully there'll be something along the way that maybe will spark an interest in you, or perhaps help you to get more clarity on what might be the right path for you. So to begin with, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the symptoms that I had over this last sort of 3 or 4 years, and how I ended up getting my diagnosis. So I suppose the main symptoms that I was really aware of was I suffered from burnout, acute adrenal fatigue, about 8 years ago now. And I'd always been what I would call highly strung. Since really being a young girl, I've always had issues around anxiety, and through my teenage years I suffered from bouts of depression, and that has always been a part of my life, and it's been in checks and balances as I've got to the ripe old age of 48 now, but over the last couple of years I've found my anxiety levels quite high and my mood really going through kind of peaks and troughs. And the resources that I'd learned to support myself after my adrenal fatigue didn't seem to be helping me as much as they had done at that time. So that was sort of two of the things that I'd noticed. The other one were I had a lot of digestive issues. I was diagnosed as having gastroesophageal reflux disorder, and a hiatus hernia to boot. And through that, I was suffering sort of mild IBS symptoms. The predominant one that was really getting me down was bloating. I could quite literally wake up in the morning and have a, for me, relatively flat stomach. And then after lunchtime, my stomach could have grown by between sort of 4 to 5 inches, which seems ridiculous that it couldn't happen, but I would almost feel my stomach swelling out and becoming tight like a drum. And then feeling really uncomfortable. I didn't have diarrhea or constipation. I just had this bloating, this feeling of discomfort. And then I was being treated for this reflux condition as well. The next thing that I was being treated for was an antihistamine reaction that I was having. I actually, believe it or not, became allergic to exercise, which is really quite ironic. On any time that I exercise for anything longer than about 15-20 minutes, I develop a full body rash. It started off just on my legs and then slowly progressed up my back and then over my chest. And eventually when it started coming up my neck, I went to see the GP. And unfortunately the GP's advice was to take antihistamines before I exercise and antihistamines after I exercise. And it was a constant battle because I'm quite an active person, and I'm probably active 4 or 5 times a week. And I didn't want to be taking 8 to 10 antihistamines a week just so that I could go and do a short kettlebell class or a swim or a cycle ride or something like that. So that was really, really bothering me. And I had investigated looking at histamine reaction foods and things like that, but hadn't quite got to the bottom of that yet. Another thing that I was back to the GP about was that I developed a staph infection on my face. So the bugs that live naturally in our kind of mucous membrane, in our mouth and in our nose, had actually colonized outside of my mucous membrane, which is pretty gross, right? I thought that I had skin cancer, which was a big concern for me. And then when I went to see a dermatologist, I was prescribed antibiotic creams to get rid of this staph infection that had colonized outside of the body. So that was another giant worry for me as well. So over the last few years, I've been diagnosed as being asthmatic, gastroesophageal reflux, hiatus hernia, IBS, histamine reaction, staph infection, low mood, increased anxiety, chronic fatigue was the other thing I started to think that perhaps I had. My energy levels, despite the fact that I feel that I eat well and that I support my blood sugar levels, my energy levels could go anywhere from being like I feel today, I feel upbeat, I feel energized, I feel clear, to wanting to lie down on the floor, literally curl up and put a towel over me and fall asleep. And quite often I was going to bed in the afternoon because I work for myself, I'm able to do that. And I just, this sense of fatigue and lethargy was really, really getting me down because there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for it. And I couldn't pinpoint whether it was food related, whether it was sleep related, because there didn't seem to be a cause and effect. There was just this overwhelming feeling of tiredness and heaviness that I was feeling in the body. And I found that very distressing as well. And then I suppose the last part of the puzzle for me was, excuse me, over the last sort of 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I weighed about 16.5 stone at my heaviest, and I managed to shed about 4 of those stones quite easily, and that came off and has never gone back on again. But over the last sort of year or so, I have increased my exercise regime. I started training for marathons. I was running a couple of marathons for a charity that were really important to me. And I thought to myself, you know what, this is going to take off this last stone that I really was keen to lose, but not a single pound. Despite training for 2 marathons 6 months apart, despite running maybe 40, 50 miles a week, every week for about a year, I didn't lose a single pound of weight. And I was thinking in the back of my head, not that I was intentionally trying to lose the weight, but I felt that surely training for the marathons, a byproduct of that would have been weight loss, but not a jot, not a single pound. I think that's quite unusual. So altogether, I had this kind of melting pot of feelings of ill health, lethargy, little reactions happening in the body. And so eventually I get to the point where I've been to the doctors and I've been to see specialists, and I feel I'm not getting any further. So I took the bull by the horns and I paid to have a series of private tests done. Those tests included quite extensive blood tests, but also breath tests, poo tests, wee tests, the whole gambit of tests. And I'll talk about those specific tests at another time. But suffice to say that the results that came back from those tests were really quite shocking to me. So the main results from my test results then were that I had small intestinal bowel overgrowth, which meant that the bugs that normally live in another part of the gut have colonized in my small intestine where they shouldn't be, and they're kind of having a free-for-all there. And that was possibly what's been causing this mass bloating that I've been experiencing. So that was something that was interesting, SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth. Then that there were massive vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Despite the fact that I feel that I eat a well-balanced diet, I was very low in magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K and vitamin C, off the charts low. And so that's obviously having a knock-on effect on my health and well-being. So that was a big shock. My sex hormones completely out of balance as well. Very low in progesterone, very low in testosterone, and pretty high in estrogen, and also very high in cortisol as well. So hormones out of balance, which we'll be explaining a lot around where and how I hold my weight, how I'm sleeping, how my body is feeling. So that was a big revelation as well. And then the last thing, which was how we ended up at the Hashimoto's diagnosis, was that while my thyroid is producing the right amounts or in the right bandwidth of T3 and T4, I'm producing 6 times the amount of thyroid antibodies within my system. So the band for the antibodies is something between 30 and 70, and for one I was over 500, and for another I was over 600. So again, this was, my thyroid is trying to produce the thyroid hormone, which is essential for everything from regulating your temperature, to your sex hormones, to your mood, to whether you can tolerate the cold, and also how your cells react in terms of your weight management. So my thyroid doesn't really stand a chance up against these thyroid antibodies that I've got. So the whole thing together, my consultant has suggested that what I'm actually suffering from, which is the big thing, is leaky gut syndrome. And so the Hashimoto's is a result of this leaky gut. And so what we're looking to do now is to treat this as the root cause of all of my issues, from the low mood, the depression, the staph infection, the hives, the weight gain, everything is all related to the gut, to this leaky gut. And it makes perfect sense to me when it's been all explained. But when I had the first consultation, I went through that period of, initially it was shock, because the word Hashimoto's, to be honest, it could have been diabetes, it could have been cancer. It seemed like such a big word that I sort of had an understanding of, knew it was something related to thyroid, didn't know if it was serious or not. Then my next feeling was around relief, that finally there seemed to be some explanation for why there was this raft of symptoms that I'd been experiencing over these last 3-4 years. But then the relief didn't last very long, excuse me, because the next thing that I felt was sheer panic, because it was like, so what now? What next? Well, what is my next step? You know, a diagnosis of Hashimoto's and leaky gut is one thing, but what do I do next? So then I felt a sense of overwhelm, because I started reading, which is kind of my go-to thing. And probably in the last 3 weeks, I've read about 6 or 8 books around Hashimoto's, thyroid, and various kind of protocols around that. And then I just felt completely overwhelmed by, there is a lot of information out there, but some of it's conflicting. And then the fact that I also have this small intestinal bowel overgrowth, a lot of the information that I was reading said that a lot of treatments and protocols for Hashimoto's are contraindicated with the SIBO diagnosis. So I was just like, Mother of God, what am I going to do? So what am I going to do? So the first thing that I've done is I've actually begun to work with our nutritional therapist who supports us here at the Body Retreat, who's Kate Delmar Morgan. And together we are working out a plan of action for the next 6 months. So we're going to look initially at supporting me through dietary changes. So for the next couple of weeks, there's going to be some big dietary changes. Then we're going to start a supplementation plan. And at the same time overlaying that, we're going to be looking at other ways to support my body, my system, and my health. And that may be things like reflexology, massage, acupuncture, and a variety of different things that I'm going to try to bring into the process to support my body to heal itself as quickly as possible. Kate thinks that this is going to take me somewhere between 6 months, but most likely up to a year, to be able to recreate this sense of balance, and more importantly, to lose these symptoms that I have and to feel that sense of wellness. So I'm going to share more as I go through week by week, month by month, telling you more about the changes to the diet, the supplementation plan, and the other factors that I'm going to be looking at. I'll share what's working well, what's not working well, but I'd love to hear your questions, your thoughts. If anything that I'm going through relates to you, and I can be helpful to you, then please drop me a line, give me a comment, because to be honest, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this alone. So your support would be invaluable to me. And if by that, any learning that I get can support any of you, then that would be a great result as well. So there you have it. I'm beginning my journey to heal Hashimoto's naturally from the inside out. So watch this space. So I'll see you again soon. Take care for now. Bye-bye.